management. So I decided when I came back from my holidays to put the book together. You could call it, you know, in 2008, I brought out a book called March 8th, the day Malaysia woke up. And then I followed it up about a year later with March 8th, Time for Real Change. Those books were my campaign for GE13. So you might consider this book to be my campaign for GE14. It's 5 years away, but we've got to start right now. If we are going to bring about any real change, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of you would be aware that it is really going to be very hard to bring about change, simply because the rules that we have to play by are going to be very hard to break. And the rules that we have to play by favor the incumbent. The rules were made by them to favor them. And they were made to make them stay in power forever. In fact, I'm reminded today of something told to me by a dear old friend of mine who passed away just 11 days ago, my ex-colleague. And I told him that we should now, you know, try to work through proper channels to bring about change at the next general election. He said to me, then I'm sorry to say, you are naive. He says, we cannot bring about change if we continue to play by the rules that are in existence. So I said, how else are we going to do it? He said, the only way is through a revolution. Now, I'm not saying we must have a revolution. We cannot have a revolution. Simply because we have to understand that although 51% of the voters voted for Pakatan Rakyat, 47% voted for Barisan Nasional. So when you have like almost a 50-50 split, there's going to be chaos if there's a revolution. Mind you, a revolution doesn't mean it's a violent one. It can be a peaceful revolution, but of course ultimately revolutions tend to end up in violence. Because when you take to the streets in a peaceful manner to protest, the troops will be sent out to take care of you. And that's when the violence starts. But in any case, it is not likely that we can have a revolution here anyway. Also because there won't be many people who would be willing to risk what they already have to go out into the streets to fight for change or whatever. Many of us are still well off, or at least we haven't reached our economic limits. We are not starving, so we will not risk what we already have. What I'm trying to do with it, I'm trying to document as much as I can about GE13 in my own way, in a way that I hope will be more interesting than straightforward reportage. So a lot of it comes from my own personal perception of GE13 and my own experience of it. But it is something that you can also join in. There may be some things you agree with, there may be some things you don't agree with, but that's fine. There's always room for debate. And that is what we need to do more of in this country. We need to provide more room for debate rather than just having it from one side. Right. The first piece that I would like to read from is from an article called GE13, Make the Right Choice. After 55 years of ruling this country, where has PN got us? The country is more divided than ever. We have been polarized on racial and religious lines for decades, but now we are divided by political leanings as well. What about our economic progress? According to the International Monetary Fund and its estimates, Malaysia's GDP per capita based on the purchasing power parity methodology amounted in 1980 to US $2,331. South Korea's was lower at US $2,302, and Taiwan's was slightly higher at US $3,571. But in 2011, South Korea's figure rose to US $31,220, an increase of 1,255%. Taiwan's went up 956%, while Malaysia's was up by only 596%. What happened? How did South Korea overtake us and in 2011 record a figure that is double that of ours? Some people say, okay, the GDP per capita is not so comprehensive, so let's look at per capita income instead. In 2011, South Korea's per capita income was US $22,424. And Taiwan's was US $20,083. How much was Malaysia's? US $9,656. Again, half that of South Korea's and also Taiwan's. Najib pledges to make us a high-income nation with a per capita income of US $15,000 in 2020. By that time, what do you think the per capita incomes of South Korea and Taiwan would be? Furthermore, would US $15,000 still qualify as high income then? By the way, our neighbor Singapore, that used to be part of Malaysia, has a per capita income of US $46,241, which is almost 5 times ours. And they don't have natural resources like we do. In the last few years, the government has hardly been talking of making Malaysia an advanced nation, which is the goal of Vision 2020, tabled in 1991. It has been more than 20 years since, enough time to consolidate efforts to attain the goal, but we are currently not near it. The talk these days is only about becoming a high-income nation instead. That's not the same as becoming an advanced nation. So that's the situation we're faced with today. I'm going to look now at a piece called Defiance is Gaining Momentum. I see a lot of defiance nowadays among Malaysians, and I take that to be a good sign. We are no longer people who used to take things sitting down. Now, they're more willing to stand up and be counted. I love the new spirit of defiance among Malaysians. I think we have come of age in realizing that we must stand up for our rights, and that it is not wrong to do so. After all, as the American political activist Howard Zinn puts it, dissent is the highest form of patriotism. I'm not just talking about the defiance shown by already known people like Ambiga Srinivasan and A. Samad Zaid, the leaders of Per Se Tui, when they spoke up or fought against the authorities to point out that the latter were wrong. I'm also talking about the courageous acts of ordinary people who, despite having no organization to back them up, did what they felt needed to be done, not just for themselves, but for a larger cause. Because then I go on to talk about the case of K.S. Bawani, who was talked down to by Sharifah Zora Jabin. Remember that famous Listen, Listen, Listen episode? We have no choice these days but to defy. Looking at the things that have been done in the last 2 weeks, some of them, bordering on insanity. The arrest of Samad Said, a harmless 81-year-old man, a poet, calls for his Sastrawan Negara title to be revoked, even calls for his, I'm not sure about that, but his citizenship to be revoked. But how does he respond? Go ahead. Take away my Sastrawan Negara title. Revoke my citizenship. That's the way to defy them. Bring it on. Call their bluff. That's what Katika did. Remember Katika? The woman who was arrested for drinking beer, and they were going to whip her. And she said, come on, whip me. I think to this day she hasn't been whipped, right? That's the only way we can defy them. We have to stand up to them. Call their bluff. So I'm very glad that we have someone like Samad Said who is showing us the way. I mean, it's crazy, an 81-year-old person. It defies the imagination.
Well, I'm glad I produced very good sheet. A sheet that will nourish and grow and defy. Well, my question here is actually, you remember about a decade ago, you are not the first person to write a sheet. There is a gentleman by name of Thuan Ahmad. He was my colleague, and he also the dean of USM. He wrote my sheet. Now, you are writing my sheet. All I want you to know is, in what way is his sheet different from your sheet? And also, question number 2, what inspired you to write about sheet, apart from defiance, and to grow and develop the country in a very different way? Simply, what inspired you to write about sheet? Thank you.
Old teacher Dr. Leong Yifong, whom I haven't seen in 46 years, to come to this occasion. I'm really honored, sir. I'm also honored that my old friends are here as well. Also, some that I haven't seen in a long time, Sukhinder Pal Singh. And I also have old friends, Thuan Ahmad chose to write it in the form of a novel, a satirical novel. And of course, we knew whom he was satirizing. He was satirizing Mahathir at the time. In my case, I've chosen to write it as political commentary. And I suppose with political commentary, you're more upfront about it. You're more in your face because you're discussing things that are topical and you can't run away from it. You're not hiding it under, I'm not saying that Thuan Ahmad was hiding anything, but you're not couching it in symbols or in euphemisms. I'm using plain language. I'm telling it like it is. I'm just an ordinary citizen. I have no access to any extra information or secret information. I write because I am moved to write. Because I look around and I see all these things happening, all this shit coming out, and I cannot stand it. And I feel that I must say something about it. And that's what I do. And so I churn out books. I would like to think that what I write is not shit, but actually pointing out shit. But to come back to Pan Cheng, I'm so honored that Pan Cheng is here. Pan Cheng is an old colleague of mine, way back in the New Straits times. We go back quite a long way, and he's been a very strong supporter. of my writing. Bunching, your question was, why are we bullied? Yes. When we were at school, why? Why did people who want to bully? Because they want to assert themselves? Or why do they want to assert themselves? Usually it's because they are insecure. They want to be noticed. They want to stake out territories because they've got nothing else to hold on to. So for them, bullying you gives them, in a way, the reason for existence. You know, it's like if they have something that, if they have what we call in Hokkien liao lah, liao. 有時講要liao啊 ，e-man bully 啊，對冇 ？It's only those who liao who try to do that. So I think in this case, it stems from a lot of insecurity. Because there's no other reason for it, really. If you look around, why my first piece I wrote about why we have not progressed as well as, say, South Korea or Taiwan or Singapore. Why? We could have. We have such a lot of natural resources. You know? If we put the right people to do the right work, we would be world beaters now. Look at South Korea. South Korea is a world beater. Look at their Samsung. Look at their, you know, even their movies. South Korean movies. They are taking on the world, conquering the world with the Korean dramas. Not that, you know, to me they're fantastic, but they're technically very well done nonetheless. That's the point. So in order for them to maintain this insecurity, they have to act tough. And they have to impose restrictions. And they have to do all kinds of things that to a lot of sensible people appear bordering on insanity, bordering on denial, on not wanting to accept the realization that in a globalized world, you have to change, you have to be competitive, you have to put the right people to do the things that will make this country work. I hope that answers your question, Banchin.
Thank you very much.
Chye, I'd just like to add two factors to why we are bullied from my experience working in the higher education ministry. Just to share. One is the herd instinct. Because of the numbers of politics or politics of numbers, sometimes they see us as knowing certain matters that has already infringed on their boundary. So the herd instinct is so strong that they do not remember that they are supposed to be having a lot of paper qualification and also high in authority, but you just have to push us down before we can even stand up because of the number game.
Thank you, Simi. If anybody wishes to share anything, please, you're most welcome to do so. This is oh yes, Dr. Lim.
I was looking through the book. I see that there has been
Purest things is this informal movement that I would like to call comrades for change. People who want change. Not that they are pro-Pakatan necessarily, but because they want to see change. And they know that if we keep the incumbent coalition, we will not see that change. Or if there is going to be change, it will be a long, long, long time coming. Maybe a couple more generations. So this phenomenon, this loose coalition of people who want change, these comrades for change, this is a phenomenon that is quite amazing to me. These are people who invested their own money, you know, to help the campaign for change. These are people who did what they could in their own way on social media or donating funds to the opposition to help them. These are people who went around trying to talk to their friends to try and persuade them to vote what they think is correct. And they were united. They were united, you know. There was nobody driving it. There was no leader. It was just a movement that came about on its own. In the US, it's like the coalition of, what do they call it? Coalition of minorities, isn't it? Yeah. That was a great
Chye.
progress. It also means that we have to trust them. But is it going to be easy for us to trust them? I mean, nowadays, whenever they say something that seems to be positive, we always think, there must be something ulterior behind it. Fair enough. We don't trust them. Trust is very difficult to earn, you know. And once you have lost it, it will take a long, long time for you to get it back. And I think that is the biggest problem, the mistake that they have made. They have lost our trust. So how do we begin then? If we cannot trust them, how trust them? You know, they are not going to trust us either. They may do everything. Now, just look at this 20-cent hike in the petrol price of RON 95. They say it's for a good purpose, right? It's supposed to address the budget deficit. But here we are saying, show us proof. How do we know that you're going to do that? On the other hand, they also say it is to help fund the PR1M payout. And that's when we start to say, why should it go to fund the PR1M payout? Who asked Najib to give up PR1M Brim? Who asked him? Why did he do it? Because he wanted to save himself during the general election. He wanted to buy votes, and now we have to pay for it. We were not going to vote for him anyway, so why should we have to pay for it now? See? So there's always two sides to it now. When they say something that seems to sound positive, they say no lah, cannot be lah. The track record speaks for itself. So it's very important what you do in life, as you know, even as a person. You know, you do good things, people will remember you, people will trust you. But once you start to do bad things, one after another, you lose it. And love. I wrote an article on that recently about this of hate, on the premise of what we think is against us or is not the same as what we do, and that should not be the case. So I suggested, why don't we look at it from the premise of love instead? Look at it from a positive point instead of from always negative about, you know, how that other is an enemy rather than somebody that we might even consider a friend or a fellow human being at the very least.
That's right. You wish for that. I mean, looking at Tanda Putra, just an example, and because you are from the third world, could you give us an idea of the damage that is planted?
I cannot, I'm sorry, because I haven't seen Tanda Putra and I don't want to spend money to see it in the cinema. But that doesn't mean I will buy a pirated DVD of it because it's a local film. Maybe it comes on a lot of damage, and we have to break away from all the things that he did. We have to restore the legitimacy of our institutions. We have to restore the rule of law. We have to have an independent judiciary. We have to have the separation of powers, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Right? Yes, and the election commission has to be independent and neutral. Yeah. So, what can we do? Right? We can, in our own small way, start by talking with people. Maybe through discussions with people we can hopefully change minds. We can write letters to the media. They may get published, they may not get published, but we do our bit. We can write about it on social media. We now have that tool open to us. Right now, they do pay some attention to social media. You know, petrol price increase, social media was angry. Some outside arrested, social media was angry. The dog trainer chats and her dog's issue, social media was angry. Listen, listen, listen. Sharifah Zora Jabi. Social media was angry. So, you can do your little bit in that way. You can join civil society groups to help them work towards change. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be slow. Yes, definitely. And of course, you can take part in protests. You can also, when G14 comes around, you can vote. You can do a lot of other things. There are quite a number of things that are part of the democratic process that a lot of us forget about. And we think that it is only exemplified in voting. No. End of this year, there's going to be a big issue coming up. And that would be the redelineation of the electoral constituencies by the Elections Commission. This is a big issue. This is something that we have to fight very hard for. We have to make sure that they redelineate it fairly. Okay? If possible, redelineate according to size of population. Okay, in East Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, we cannot touch the fact that they are guaranteed so many number of seats. It's part of the agreement that we cannot do anything about. But they can still break down some of the seats to make it proportionate. And in terms of proportionate size, we used to have a provision, I'm not sure if it was the constitution or it was under the election laws or what, that the constituency should not have more than 15%.
Recommission.
Huh?
Recommission.
The recommission only.
REID, recommission
Oh.
before independence.
Right. So why don't we bring that back? So it should not exceed 15%. Yeah, you're going to say something.
Sorry, just one more last question. And you talk about the
That calls for a lot of hard work, which Pakatan Rakyat should invest in. NGOs should invest in. Some of them are doing that, you know. I read many postings on social media right after the general election when there was this realization that we need to penetrate the rural areas. Many young people wrote on Facebook, posted on Facebook that they were willing to volunteer to go out to the rural areas to explain to the people there the issues of the day, make them understand better. Opposition parties should capitalize on that. At the end of the day, they also have to do their part. We do our part, they also must do their part. Yeah? So you can always push your representatives, if they are part of the opposition, to take up this issue and go to the kampong.
After the elections, I actually wrote a personal note to the Chief Minister. I actually got a reply, by the way, within 2 weeks. And I put down 3 things they have to do. One is that in Peninsula, they've got to let PAS lead the way to reach to the rural Malays, rural areas of all the states. 2, because of the stronghold that DAP has got and the inroads they have made in Sarawak, let DAP lead the tripartite path there. And because of the UMNO factor in Sabah, and the fact that a lot of PKR people are ex-UMNO, I said let PKR lead that tripartite efforts in Sabah. And if I if I look at the message that was shared with the Rakyat of Penang post-elections in the rally in Esplanade, it was clear that some of the political stalwarts of Penang, in DAP as well as even in PKR, took on this and actually said they need to start the journey now. My only concern is that that came across as a feeling of the day, a feeling that was within that 51% kind of deal, right? And I hope it doesn't just die off and fizzle out, and then it becomes another panic situation, maybe 12 months before the next elections. That's too late.
What did the CM say to you?
He basically thanked me for that and said that he recognizes that and that the journey starts and all the Rakyat has to work together.
Thank you for sharing that. You are?
Johnny Tan.
Thanks, Johnny. Of course, Pakatan Rakyat has to do what is necessary for things to happen. But of course, when you have three parties involved, they too will have their own self-interests. That's the problem too. You see, after 2008, for instance, they could have done much more to penetrate the rural areas. Even in terms of setting up their own information machinery to let the people know about what they're doing, whatever good things they're doing. They didn't go about setting it up. They did much later, maybe about 1.5 years before the next general election was to come around, but that's a bit late. You need to start from the beginning. So now, we have to start the campaign for GE14. And I hope they will take it up. Combine together in order to counter Mahathir. What is the point? At the end of the day, you then come up with once you have gotten rid of Mahathir, you will start to spin your own bullshit. Anwars and Najibs. We don't want that. We want one side to stay out of it. Stay out of government now in order to fight more strongly for it the next round. Once they join in, finished. End of story. You can say goodbye to any change, to any hope of salvation for this country. What is wrong with voting for the opposition? Why is an opposition set up in the first place? Isn't it to provide competition to the ruling party? So if people are more persuaded by the case made by the opposition, why shouldn't they vote for it? Mahathir and the rest of them surely can't be ignorant of what a democracy is. For their enlightenment, let me point out that in a democracy, any number of parties can take part in a contest to decide which one should become the government. And the people who choose through voting are free to vote for any party. So, since that is the case, it is neither a crime nor a moral wrong to vote for the opposition. And that is why in a democracy, the ruling party can be voted out if more people feel it doesn't deserve to be the government anymore. This, in fact, was what happened at GE13. The popular vote for Pakatan Rakyat was higher than that for BN. But since our electoral system is based on the first past the post one, and due to gerrymandering, the opposition needs to win more votes to win seats, BN came out the undeserving winner. Ali Rustam, the former chief minister of Malacca who lost in the polling and thereafter appeared a sore loser, echoed his master Najib and blamed the Chinese too. I quote, "The results have shown that the Chinese do not appreciate the government. They just want to change without considering the consequences and what we have done for them all this while," unquote. Well, what is there to appreciate of a government that is corrupt and continually plays the race card? Even during the GE13 campaign period, its leaders, especially Mahathir, were saying things to demonize the DAP in order to frighten the Malays and persuade them against supporting the party and its PR partners, PKR and APS. Furthermore, contrary to what Ali Rustam says, the Chinese did consider the consequences. They knew why they voted for the opposition. They wanted Pakatan Rakyat to form the next government so that a new Malaysia might emerge, purged of the malpractices of BN and its rotten system and culture. Anyway, Ali Rustam should learn from his BN colleague, former Deputy Minister Saifuddin Abdullah, who also lost in the elections. Saifuddin said he did not blame anyone for his defeat. As for the Chinese vote, he said, I quote, "It was not against the Malays and certainly not about being ungrateful," unquote. He added, I quote, "It was more like they wanted to teach the MCA a lesson. Some of the voters told me frankly, we like you, but we want to teach the MCA a lesson," unquote. The Chinese wanted to teach the Chinese party a lesson. That summed it up correctly. They voted for the DAP, but they also voted for Malay candidates from PKR and PAS. Some Malays also voted for the DAP. Otherwise, it wouldn't have won so many seats in Johor, Selangor, Penang, etc. Which debunks the spin that Najib concocted when he said Dian's poorer performance this time was due to a Chinese tsunami. Fortunately, he has since been pointed out to be grossly wrong by many people, including BN politicians, who say instead that it was a Malaysian tsunami. Ali Rustam is quoted in Utusan Malaysia, the UMNO-owned newspaper that published the offensive article, "Apalagi Cina Mau," as saying the Chinese are racist. He might do better to reserve that tag for Mahathir. Before polling day, Mahathir irresponsibly said that if the DAP's Lim Kit Siang were to win the Gelang Patah seat, there would be a racial conflict. And after the results came out, he blamed the Chinese and said the Malays who voted for the opposition were greedy. Why greedy? Because, he said, they were willing to sell their own race. Is politics about race? In multiracial Malaysia, should it be about race? Isn't it perpetuating racial conflict to drum it into people they should vote for the ruling party because of their race? Why are leaders who should know better telling people to vote according to their race? Why are leaders like Mahathir taking this racist approach? Mahathir keeps rubbing it in that Malays who voted for the opposition should not have done so. He seems to imply that they couldn't think for themselves. He and his ilk must think that such Malays are stupid, but he's very wrong. They are among the most intelligent people in Malaysia. And the more he rubs it in, the more he will distance them from him and his party. Malaysians who voted for the opposition, regardless of race, did so following their conscience. They should not be shaken by bullying talk, even if it comes from a prime minister or a former one. They ought to know what such politicians are capable of saying. Najib now says he wants to be, I quote, "a prime minister for all Malaysians," unquote. And yet, he defended what Utusan Malaysia wrote in that offensive article, obviously aimed at causing racial tension. He talks of national reconciliation, and yet he doesn't walk the talk. As I have written before in my book, No More Bullshit Please, We're All Malaysians, Najib speaks with a forked tongue. I am repeating it here. If he wants national reconciliation, he should clean up the system, dismantle Mahathirism and cronyism, free the media, make the EC and Petronas answerable to Parliament, redelineate the electoral constituencies to ensure a fair fight for all parties in GE14, and do many more things right. Otherwise, what he is saying is nothing but bullshit. No one can tell the Chinese to go back to China or the Indians to go back to India. Unquote. This is the best, the most positive, people unifying statement to come out in decades. And it did not come from a leader of the ruling Barisan Nasional Coalition. It came from 20 civil society groups led by Solidarity Anak Muda Malaysia, SAMM, headed by Badrul Hisham Shaharin, popularly known as Chye, who was unfortunately voted out because of PAS's intervention at the last general election in Penang, wasn't it? And student group Solidarity Malaysia, Mahasiswa Malaysia, SMM, headed by Thuan Anang, who has since been arrested and charged with sedition a couple of times. As they mark May 13, the tragic day in 1969, when racial riots broke out and drove the races apart. They mark the occasion with a call for an end to racism. A teacher told me that when she read the statement reported in a newspaper, she burst into tears. It was particularly emotional for her because she had personally experienced being told to go back to China. This was about 30 years ago when she had newly arrived in Kuala Lumpur from a small town up north and was riding in a taxi. As she tried to explain to the taxi driver where she wanted to go in halting Malay, the man was repulsed by her lack of fluency in the national language. He bluntly told her to go back to China. The remark shocked and humiliated her, but she was too afraid to say anything. Since then, she has lived with the wound without hope of healing. The decades that followed made it worse, as politicians of the ruling party played the race card to divide and rule, as the media reported more incidents of Chinese being told to go back to China and Indians to go back to India, as if they were not citizens of the country, as if they were merely tenants in the home they helped to build. So that is the hope we have in our young people. The hope that we could see, for instance, during the Black 505 rally in Batu Kawan, Penang. I was there. I saw that about 80% of the people who attended that rally were young people. So we must cultivate the young too. We must help them to make it possible for real change to happen in the future. So what happens now? What happens between now and GE14? This is addressed in the last part of the book, in which I asked about 30 over people, Malaysians, concerned, caring Malaysians, some prominent ones, what they think. And you can read about it in the last part of the book. So I'd like to end on that note of hope and looking forward. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.